Welcome to Human Rights Education Now, a podcast series from Human Rights Educators USA. I'm your host, Bill Fernikes, a member of the National Steering Committee of HRE USA, a collaborative network to learn, teach, organize, advocate, and innovate for human rights education in the United States. This podcast aims to raise awareness about human rights education and invites listeners to engage with the worldwide movement to make human rights education a core focus of educational programs from preschool through higher education, and in both non-formal and informal community educational settings. Today's program is a conversation with Abraham Magendzo, a longtime leader of human rights education in Latin America and a professor at the Universidad Académica de Humanismo Cristiano in Santiago, Chile. Our conversation includes your host, Bill Fernikes, Abraham Magendzo, incoming podcast host Yvonne Bissing, and executive producer Christy Redelius-Palmer. Abraham discusses the origins of his interest in human rights and human rights education, how his graduate study in the U.S. and Israel influenced his approach to human rights, the challenges he faced during the Pinochet dictatorship in Chile, and how he worked to advance the restoration of civil society after the dictatorship's fall, his work to develop human rights education in Latin America, the importance of linking key concepts about human rights education to the lived experiences of populations, the significance of emphasizing economic, social, and cultural rights when discussing human rights issues, connections between human rights violations and political power, his role in advancing educator training in human rights, who has been the most influential role model for his work, a quote that exemplifies his view on the importance of human rights, human rights violations against indigenous peoples in Chile, and lastly, his role in developing collaborative projects about the experiences of human rights educators across the world. Well, it is indeed such a great pleasure to be speaking today with Abraham Magendzo. And today, our interview team includes myself, Bill Fernikes, and our new host for this podcast, Yvonne Bissing, who will be taking over as host in July of this year. So, Abraham, how have you been?
Okay, thank you.
Abraham is speaking to us from Santiago, Chile. How's the weather down there today, Abraham?
We are starting the winter. We are in autumn. Then it's a little cold.
Okay. So, can you tell us how you first became interested in human rights issues and then in human rights education?
I can say that there are many reasons, but there are two main reasons. First of all, I am a Jew, and the Holocaust is very close to me. And in the Holocaust, human rights were violated. It's so good to see how human rights were violated during the Holocaust to everybody, not only to Jews, but to Egyptians and to communists and so on. Second, being a Chilean, we had in 1973, we had a group of states. The group of states violated human rights and made people disappear and torture and so on. Then I could say that since in both cases, in the Holocaust, in the group of state in Chile, human rights were violated horrible. Then this I would say they are the two main reasons why did I become human rights education.
So to follow up on that, when the Pinochet regime became the government of Chile after they coup against Allende, what did you see as the most important need to defend human rights? How did you feel right at that moment what you needed to do?
Yeah, well, it wasn't in the right moment when Allende was killed or he killed himself. But later, what happened to Allende sure to every Chilean that was clear that the human rights were violated. And in the coup of state, after the coup of state, during the Pinochet time, he violated human rights, made people disappear and kill people and so on. Then, answer your question, these are the main reasons for me.
You've helped to rebuild society. And so I wanted to ask you, in the rebuilding of a civil society following an authoritarian rule, it must be a very difficult thing. And I would love to know more about what role you played in that process in Chile and in other Latin American countries.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. You should understand that in Chile, after we recovered democracy, 1999, dictatorship, it means Pinochet, was in the parliament. And then it wasn't easy to start to work on human rights. However, we started. We started definitely.
What were some of the things you did to start the human rights education programs then?
When I took studies in Israel and UCLA, University of London, I should say that the subject of human rights it wasn't important. They didn't mention it. That this wasn't there. Maybe in the School of Law they talk about human rights, but not education for human rights. But otherwise, in these places, usually in Israel and the University of London, no mention was given to human rights, to human rights education.
So let's take out this idea. So if you had a dictatorship in Chile, there were other dictatorships in Latin America and Argentina, for example, for 3 years. What were the steps you had to take to rebuild civil society about human rights? Like, if you took us through the process, what did you do?
Well, since violation of human rights not only took place in Chile, but in many of the Latin American countries, in Argentina, in Colombia, in Peru. And then we understood that if we recover democracy, then we have to start to talk and teach human rights in the schools and outside the schools, other places. But it wasn't easy. I remember that after we recovered the democracy, the Minister of Education that I knew, he called me and asked, talk with me, and he said, Abraham, in Chile and many other countries in Latin America, the dictatorship is there, Pinochet is there. Then I would suggest that instead of talking about education, human rights, why we don't talk about education in love? I told him, look, his name was Gonzalo. Look, Gonzalo, I am not against love, the opposite. But human rights and love, maybe you can put it together, but they are different things. We are trying to educate it that people will understand what is human rights. Love, I like love, but this is not the point. The point is to teach and that people will understand what is human rights and what is violation of human rights.
So how did you get involved in working in other Latin American countries?
Well, since I started immediately that recover democracy, I started to write and send papers and books and publications to some friends in Latin America. And they started to read my papers, and not only my papers. The people started to write papers and books and in magazines and so on. As I will tell you later that we have, in Latin America at least, we have built and we have made very important progress. In the beginning was difficult, but later we have made good progress in education and human rights. It's not easy, but we have made important progress.
Yes, I think that your contributions to scholarship with your writings really have mattered. And as you say, that you were able to share your work with others, and that inspired them to feel strong to do their own writing and change the world. So when you talk about you being a human rights educator, that has been a very important contribution. And I would like to thank you for that.
Yeah, to be honest and humble, I think that I started very human rights education almost immediately after we recovered democracy.
Well, I would like to follow up and look at what's happening in the United States right now with all the threats to democracy here. And so in the U.S., discussion around human rights often don't examine the social and economic and political and cultural rights, and they prefer to focus on like civil rights. In Latin America, you have made social, economic, and cultural rights part of your work. Could you talk about that?
Well, we at least we understood that human rights is related to politics, it's related to politics, to culture, to social issues. We understand that human rights is not a separate issue, but it's connected and related to all social issues. Since the beginning in Latin America, we understood that human rights should be related, it is related to politics, definitely, and to culture and social issues.
So, Abraham,
Yes.
can you tell us about who in the field of scholarship has influenced you? For example, Freire and others, and what ideas have you drawn from people like Paulo Freire and other intellectuals?
Yeah. Look, Paulo Freire inspired not only human rights, but he inspired the thinking of human was to be free, to be a free man, to relate to others, to be conscious that the others are equal, different, equal of us. All this issue, Paulo Freire wrote about it. He was a marvelous person, and not only marvelous, he were put on the table issues that we consider very important. When we started to human rights, we said we have to connect to the writing and thought of Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire inspired a lot of things in education and inspire us to our work in human rights.
Who were some other authors or scholars that you have drawn upon?
Well, there are in every country, there are people that we should mention that inspire human rights education. In Peru, there was a man, a priest, that he inspired human rights education. And in every country there were people that are very important, and in every country where people.
I want to talk to you about, or have you tell us about this idea of vernacularization.
Yeah, this term, vernacularización, I should say very honestly that I didn't know the term, but in internet I understood what is, and definitely human rights education, it can be very difficult for people to understand the language of human rights. And then we have to try to build a language that people are will understand. This is vernacularización. It means is to make difficult language a much more easy language for people. We're not talking, we have teaching, educating human rights, not only professors of university, to grasp people, to very humble people. Then we have to build a language that people will understand us. And this is very important. We include myself, intellectuals, saying that everybody understand our language. And this is not right. This is not the case. People, if we talk in our intellectual language, people will not understand us. And we have to understand that people are humble and they understand the more easy language. And then we have to talk a language that is close to their experience, to their context, and so the language will make sense for them. If not, we have to be very clear that sometimes we talk on human rights in a very high, sophisticated language. People don't understand us. Then we have to try to build it and to relate a language that is much more easy that people will understand. If not, we are talking in the vacuum. We have to be very clear on this, that the language of human rights is not easy. Then we have to translate the language in a language that people understand. This is very important.
So, can you give us an example of how you did that in some of your work or how it's been done in Latin America?
Well, there are many examples. If you say that the human rights is a right that is concerned to everybody, maybe they will not understand. They will understand if you say, look, if you will be attending your family or your community, over there are human rights. Not only the dictatorship, the dictator has violated human rights. In the day-and-day life, we are committing a violation of human rights. And then this is important to relate it to the experience of the people, not to talk in the Luft, in the high air, but to talk in the language of and the experience and the context of the people. That is very important.
So that essentially is what Freire was saying in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, correct? He was talking about having people look at their lived experience, correct?
That's right. That is right. I have tried that people will understand that, as I said before, not violation took place when the dictator was there, the dictatorship was there. But in our day-to-day life, there is violation of human rights. In the family, in the school, teachers sometimes, not always, sometimes violate human rights. Then we have to be conscious that human rights is not a matter of a dictator. It's a matter of day-to-day life. Then we have to be clear that we can commit violation of human rights in our day-to-day life, in our context, in our communities, in our families, in our schools. Then we have to be conscious of this. We have to talk about that the human rights is not only related to the dictator, but it's also in our day-to-day life, in our day-to-day experience and communities.
Yvonne, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that because I think that what you're saying is so very important. Where I live in the United States, people are upset and that they feel violated. And especially we look at things that divide us, but things that we have in common. And talking about helping people to see the things we have in common. For instance, gun violence is a real problem here. No one would really like to be the victims of gun violence, yet we find bifurcation between the sides where they can't agree. We're looking at violations on who can vote and who cannot, moving people out of the country on immigration and refugee problems, discrimination of minorities, being afraid to publish, especially they call it the DEI or the diversity and equity in education. It's really human rights information, and some places are afraid now. Scholars are afraid to publish. So we see a lot of these kind of pressures here. What do you see going on in Latin America and Chile as the big human rights issues? And how are you using your human rights lens to address them?
Now, I would be now starting to write a paper on human rights education empowered. We have poor people in almost all Latin American countries. The population of poor people who cannot, with what they get from their salary or they don't get, they cannot, they're poor. Then we have to be conscious that poorness is a place where human rights is not a place, it's a situation where human rights is violated every moment. Poor people are suffering from many human rights violations. Many. Then we have to be conscious of in our countries, we have a big population of poor people that cannot pay.
This notion of everyday violation and the notion of human rights are indivisible, with the violation of one right impacts the violation of other rights. And so this is what you're talking about with poverty. It makes other rights very difficult to obtain.
Yeah.
So, Abraham, recently in Chile, there was for lack of a better term, a more conservative president elected.
Yeah.
Is that going to become a challenge for you and your programs and others on human rights education with the change in the leadership?
Well, the president is a very righteous. So he declared himself a right is political talking. It is there is, and we, at least I and other people, share a little bit what will be with human rights education, any human rights. I am a little scared. I don't know. I hope that you will understand what is human rights. But he is a very righteous man. It means he's not from left, it's the right, extreme right. And then I don't know how will you approach human rights. I hope that you will be sufficiently intelligent despite of this on the right side, political, okay, he's on the right side, but he is well understand that the violation of human rights cannot be in our country. That's, I hope so. But he's a right man is from the political rights and then an extreme political rights. Then I hope that you will be reasonably intelligent to not to start to violate. You know, he started, as a matter of fact, he's sending now people that have entered our country as an immigrant or an illegal immigrant, not with document, but illegal. He is sending, he said, I will send him 300,000 people. You know, this was a silly thing that he said. He said, I will send all of them out of the country if you don't have, it didn't have entered the country legally. All the illegal out. That's the violation of human rights. He is violating human rights, but he is not conscious about it. Yeah.
Well, that's a problem that we're facing in the United States, but it's also a problem in Europe. And I think if you look at the larger issue of world migration, these efforts to try to keep people from entering countries are simply going to fail because historically it's never worked. So I think one of the real issues that you're bringing up is how do we defend the rights of people who are migrants?
And even they enter illegally, they have rights. They are not people without rights. They have rights in spite that they enter the country illegally. Person is a man is a man. A person is a person in spite of if he's entered the country legally or illegally. He has human rights. We should understand. And he is, our president is, I think he doesn't understand it.
Or maybe he doesn't want to understand it. That could be the other part of it.
Do you have a prediction of what you think is going to happen with human rights in Chile and Latin America?
Well, as you know, for some reason, people are in the elections, they're electing people of the right, the political right, in all our countries, not only in Chile. And this put us in a very difficult situation. And we have to consider why is it in Chile and in other countries, Latin America, they have now right leaders, right political leaders. But this I don't know. We have to learn what is happening with this left. Maybe the left is, well, yeah.
It's
So,
very challenging. What you say, it is a global problem for human rights, isn't it? And to what degree can human rights education moderate that?
Well, we hope that it will moderate it. That we are thinking that we're doing. I cannot be sure, you know. It's difficult to say.
So Abraham, as we talk about a few other things, there are some questions I'd like to bring up now. The first one is, who would be the most influential role model or person for your work on human rights or perhaps even children's rights?
Right now, look, I should say that in Latin America at least, but maybe in other countries, continents too, we have made important progresses. Look, now in Latin America, in every country, there are groups of educators in human rights. In every country, we have networks on human rights situations. In almost all our Latin American countries, there are a small network of people that are considered and they meet and they talk. And we have also a Latin American and Caribbean network that we meet every 2 years in some country where talk about our experience in education and human rights. Then we have progress. We have not we have we are writing a lot. We are publishing a lot. It doesn't mean that we have done all what we need to do, but I have to recognize that we have made important progress, important from what we started. Today we have this workshop. Yeah, we have made very important progress.
Do you have a favorite quote that sums up your view about human rights? A favorite saying from someone that you have read, or a quote, or a song, a poem?
Well, we have talked about Paulo Freire, yeah, and we have people in our networks. We have people that are very in every country, and people that are considered very important in human rights education in Latin America. We have it in Peru, and we have it in Brazil, and we have it in Colombia. Yeah, we have people that are very committed to human rights education and to human rights, but on human rights education. Yeah, we have people. I'm not the only one, but there are in every country there are very good people that are committed to human rights education. Yeah, we have good people. No, well, now because there is internet, I always ask questions to internet to understand the development of human rights, and I get very good answers that are very clear, very interesting. Now, today you can use internet to relate to many people that are working on the field. No, I am not alone, and no one is alone. We are somos uno en muchos.
Thank you very much for spending the time to talk to us and to educate us and others who will listen to your words on the podcast. Thank you for spending this opportunity with us.
Thank you to invite me to talk with you, Bill, and you, and everybody. With Christy, I am contact. Then we have a family, and that's good.
So, Abraham, before we go, here's the last question. If you could make one change to advance human rights education, what would you do?
We have to pass from talking to action. This is very important. At least in Latin Americans, we are talking. We know how to talk. To act is different. Then we have to pass from talking to action. That's very important.
So you said the last quote was about we must stop speaking about it and act. So connecting what you talked about with the current situation on immigration, we have here, I don't know if you can see it. This is done in Minnesota. Oh, I'm holding it upside down. Isn't that appropriate? Ice out of Minnesota Makoche. No one is illegal on stolen land. Here in Minnesota, I don't know if you have heard and seen some of what has been going on in our community with our federal government, ICE, coming in and creating many human rights violations, and the people's response to trying to protect our neighbors. I'm wondering, whether or not there are indigenous movements in Chile that's talking about the land as being actually stolen. So trying to think about protecting the people who may be deported in the future.
I understand. But
Thank you.
We have people, indigenous people here in Chile, that they have been treated very bad. Historically, they have been considered Chileans. They are Mapuches. They are not Chileans. They are Mapuches. They are Mapuches. A big violation of your right. They are not.
Yeah, thank you. What do you remember that would be useful for the next generation to think about?
Yeah, we should, the young people that would come to us. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Bueno.
And the last thing that I want to uphold is your work. You were inspired to have 25 leaders from around the world to write on their personal stories for towards a just society, the personal journeys of human rights educators. Why did you decide that book was so important?
Because I think that everybody, we are in the same issue, but everybody has a different experience. We don't have the same experience, different. And we have to share, and there are different experiences that we have with human rights, and to put them in the short, I tried to read the book is on experience on human rights, different experience on human rights. Yeah.
Well, and you built a collaboration because you reached out to me at the University of Minnesota, so it became one of our topic series books. We pulled in Bill from Rutgers and Nila Navarro, so they did the translation with the Spanish English and English Spanish. So you built that network, and people are using that book, I know, a lot. And so it's still continuing. And it inspired my work to complete a dissertation. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for me being able to ask a couple of those questions. I appreciate your insights.
Well, Abraham, it's been a great pleasure and an honor to speak with you today, and we thank you very much for being with us.
I'm so glad to have the opportunity to be with you. We are really a family, but a good family. And estoy contento. I am very happy that we can do it. Muchas gracias.
De nada, salud y pesetas, Abraham.
Thank you for listening. Today you heard another story at Human Rights Now about the amazing things people are doing to make the world a better place. We hope that you will tune into more of our podcast. You can find more information about this podcast series at www.hreusa.org. Every one of our great episodes is available on the HRE USA podcast page, Spotify, Apple and Google Podcast, and Deezer. They will soon be available on YouTube and SoundCloud. You can download each episode as an MP3 file. Our podcast team includes me, your host, Yvonne Vissing, executive producer, Christy Rodelius-Palmer, editor, Elizabeth Schwab, sound designer and project manager, Sabrina Sanchez, production coordinator Jasmine Fusagota, and mentoring from Bill Fernikes. If you have questions or comments about this podcast, send them to Christy, Kristi, at hreusa.org. Human Rights Education Now is a production of Human Rights Educators USA, a project of the Center for Transformative Action in Ithaca, New York. See you next time.